Hello, my name is Anthony Vadada, and I'm putting these Skywriters, Space Division Skywriters, on YouTube so people can take a look at them. They're very interesting. They're good for genealogy of people that might have worked at North American Aviation Space Division in Downey. That's during the Apollo era. This is primarily issues from 1969. It starts, I guess, with Apollo 7, and it goes, I guess, up to Apollo 12. You'll find that these contain a tremendous amount of information about the construction of these spacecraft and information of the landings and other activities that went on at the plant and at the Cape too. Primarily, these issues were given once a week at the gate at the Space Division guard gates, and not everybody got them. I was a night shift. I missed a lot of these, but I've got a hold of some of them, and I got more about oxygen and from other engineers. We've been trying to gather them all together so we'll have a more complete amount of issues to show. I think there's one or two issues here that are missing. I have none on December. I don't know if they're even adding in December of 1969. But there's a lot of excellent articles here in the plant about the Apollo and of the construction, and a lot of detail of some of the things that were going on, testing, and people's activities over there. And we had rec center and had other activities going on too, recreational. Some people find even the ads are pretty good to see what people were, kind of cars they were selling and driving at that time. They had little advertisements at every issue. So anyway, I thought you might want to see these, and I've got this huge collection. I have more years. I'm just putting this on for now, so I'll pause now for now. Well, anyway, these newsletters were excellent. There was a lot of secrecy in working at this place, and everything was compartmentalized. What means that one department would do one thing and another would do something else, and they didn't talk to each other. But the newspaper kind of bound us all together because it gave you an overall picture of what was going on. So we had the way the facility was made. It's a huge facility. It's almost a square mile. We had this giant building called Building 1, and in there they had the fabrication facility where they assembled the spacecraft. They had the Apollo, the one that was made in Downey, was not the lander. It was actually the spaceship that carried the astronauts to the moon and returned them back. And so this was built in Downey, and the spacecraft consisted of a cockpit they called the command module, and the service module was attached to it, and it was called, they handled all the rockets and fuel and the tanks and a lot of the power that was used there. They were using, they had one battery in there and some fuel cells. I think there was 3 fuel cells there. The fuel cells is kind of like a liquid battery, but it's very complicated. But what's nice about it, it gives you a lot of punch for a long period of time, and it's not that big. I mean, compared to how many batteries it would be. So the fuel cells are excellent for long use of power. The side product of the fuel cells was water, so they had plenty of water, and the electricity was these fuel cells. The batteries were used because the spacecraft was separated during landing. The capsule would be separated from the service module, and the service module would just jettison it when it came back to Earth, and command module would actually do the landing. The command module had the 3 astronauts in it, all the controls, and they had a heat shield on the bottom consisted, looked kind of like resin, and it would burn off in layers. It was kind of like the theory behind burning charcoal. It would burn off in little layers. So because of the tremendous heat, they had other things to keep the spacecraft cool too, so an insulation. But anyway, that's basically consisted of the product we made was that the command module, the service module. I believe we also did. There was an escape rocket that went on top, and they made that too. And all that was tested at in a building. Another building was like a two-story building. It was a high bay building with cranes on it, and it was used to maneuver the spacecraft with into some fixtures we had there. They were called test stands. Actually, we call them stacks, and we mounted the birds vertically, and it would be pointing up, and we'd run connections to it with cables and pipes and everything else to run our test in there. And the astronaut, when we got them to a point where they were running pretty well, testing well, the astronauts would come in, and then they'd go over the same tests and things that we were doing, and they run these countdowns, similar to what they would use in the Cape. And we had a system there. It was called the ACE system, and it was run by the engineers at ATO, Apollo Test and Operations. So anyway, the high bay was a clean room, and the controls were in the adjacent rooms next to it. It was 2 stories, and we had about 4 of these ACE stations. And the ACE station consisted of a control room. It had all the displays and buttons and whatnot, and they had a computer room that was separated from the control room, and that ran all the control rooms. Actually, what it is, it had little buttons on there to run these specific tests, and they'd push this button to run a specific test for test the engine or other things like that. They also had some keyboard for the computer. Anyway, the computers were that they had there. It was an old mainframe computer, and it had the old type with the wheels spinning, and it had printed circuit cards and and paper that got printed out too, and these large sheets of paper. So all this was done in the control room. The system they used there was, I believe, it's called Fortran. It's not used anymore, but it was used really pretty common use at that time. And these general use computers could be used for anything, doing accounting and whatever. These were specialized for the guidance system for the Apollo, mainly because it didn't have that big of memory. I think it was like 64K or something on memory. It was very big on these mainframe computers. They're very tiny memories, but they did the job, and it was adequate to do what would have to be done. So the control room was connected to the bird through a terminal room, and they had these cables going through there, and they had cable racks and things of that nature. We also had an RF room that was also a telemetry room, and it did all when they disconnected all the cables, everything would be tested going through the RF room, and they would run the same identical tests and similar to what they're going to do on space. So they went through the countdowns and various things that had to be done, and tested some of the components there. Anyway, this video is not about that particular function, but I thought I'd mention it to kill some time here rather than just seeing these papers that kind of give you some information about the plant. And the Building 290 sat south of Building 1, so they would bring the fabricated command and service modules over to the Building 290, run the tests, and when they were all done, there was a door in the back, and they would they'd bring a big giant truck as a transport, similar to what they use for cars, to transport cars, and they put the service module and the command module there, and they would take this spacecraft over to the Long Beach airport, and from there they would fly it off to the Cape. One of them was called 2TV1. That was flown to Houston. It was kind of a simulator they used in a vacuum chamber. Other than that, it was a magical time. It was the problem we were working many hours. We were working 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. It was really hard on all of us, especially the wives and the engineers and technicians. Everybody was having trouble with that. And all those hours, they stay with you, and it caused a lot of health problems with people later on, and there too. Anyway, so I'm glad you watched this video, and I thought it would be appropriate to mention some of these other things that were going on at the plant. A lot of people don't realize that Downey was where they actually made, in California, was actually where they made the spacecraft. I don't know where they thought it was made at, but that's where it was made. We had 3 main facilities. It was for NASA anyway. This was one of them, and the other one was in Houston, and that was where the main controls were when the spacecraft was orbiting around the Earth and going to the moon. So that was Houston. They call it Houston Control, and then they had the launch facility, and they'd have the launch controls there and at the Cape, and there was quite a bit of equipment because it looked all very similar. There was big consoles, and they had monitors on there and buttons and switches and knobs, and it was very impressive at the time. And we could really go into these spacecraft electronically and look at a lot of the features they had in there, and it was very useful at the time, because if we would use hand testing like was conventional before an aircraft, it would have taken us a long time to make that. Right now, these computer tests would run maybe in a day or two, compared to 3 or 4 months or 6 months. So it was very practical to have these computers run these tests. It was fairly new. They had started doing that on the Gemini and the Mercury, but this was really got more sophisticated. And it continued on with the space shuttle. It was a little more complicated, more sophistication, more crude. But it all, the Apollo was kind of like the place that was really concentrated, and they did a perfect job on that. Anyway, the spacecraft, we put it together, and it was everybody's effort in there. We had 30,000 people in that plant, and about this time, when these newsletters were coming out, engineering was done, so it was all done. So what they started doing was laying off people. So by the time the spacecraft landed on the moon with the lunar module, the plant had gone from 30,000 people to about 8,000 people. So our reward for working in that place was to get laid off. But it's okay. We went on the other areas, and the knowledge we gained there was really good. I think it helped people do a lot more with practical things on Earth. I got laid off, and I came back later on again. I went to a different job. I was a test engineer, and I came back and I worked in facilities as an electrical engineer working on the buildings. So I worked on the space shuttle as a support facilities to put these buildings together so they would be able to test them, and that's really important too. You can't have these spacecrafts without having these factories that are geared for production and getting these birds done properly. I thank you for watching this video. It's getting real close to the end, I think. I can't imagine how much more I've got to go. So, thank you, and goodbye. Well, it seems like there's a little bit longer. I've got to talk a little bit more, so don't have to, but it just sounds, I was going to put music on here, but I just know what kind of appropriate music to put on here. You know, nothing, space music is not common, especially now. I don't know, it's something modern. I didn't know what was really appropriate, so I thought I would fill in the space was my boring conversation here, but anyway, I thought I'd try to make it educational and give you a few ideas of what was going on at the time. We had a lot of effort, and everybody contributed on there. We had illustrators and engineers and everybody going through the spacecraft. When I started on Apollo 1. We had nothing, and we had to figure out how to put everything together. And these guys, the engineers and illustrators, would follow us around. I was a tech at the time, and later on I got promoted, became an engineer. But everybody's important. Even these test fixtures and everything, it was well thought out. The ground support equipment, which is the testing equipment that went in there, but we had plenty of it, and it was well thought out, and a lot of it was special purpose. And these things were not just randomly made; they were made with specific purpose, and they were developed like I worked at another facility before here was a Minuteman missile. They used a lot of these consoles to check out the computer boards on the guidance system for the Minuteman missile. So this is kind of like an evolution that was going on at the time in aerospace. And just from the 60s were just a lot of that was going on, and it just continued on to the present. I'm glad to see now that they decided to put the space program back in gear again after 50 years, and yesterday they landed they not landed, but they launched, and a successful launch of the SpaceX Falcon 9 CM2, and the 2 astronauts on there are safely on board now the SST space station. So that's a big bravo for those guys, and hope to see them go on to the moon now. Anyway, I was all excited to see these astronauts get to space again, and Elon Musk did a good job, and it makes us all proud to be Americans. So anyway, I'm just about getting to the end of this video, so this is truly a goodbye, and thank you for watching my videos, or this particular video myself. Bye now.